Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. Before we jump in, quick disclaimer. Everything I'll be talking about today is based on my own personal research and limited legal experience. I'm not a lawyer, but I have studied law briefly, and I've tried my best to make sense of this topic using what I've learned. So please take this video as an informative breakdown and commentary, rather than professional legal advice. Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. Before we jump in, quick disclaimer. Everything I'll be talking about today is based on my own personal research and limited legal experience. I'm not a lawyer, but I have studied law briefly, and I've tried my best to make sense of this topic using what I've learned. So please take this video as an informative breakdown and commentary, rather than professional legal advice. Now, with that out of the way, make sure to like and subscribe if you want to stay updated on everything going on with NEWJEANS, Adore, and the legal side of K-pop. I'm currently active on both my own and Jasmine's channel. Alright, let's get into it. On October 30th, after 8 long months of back and forth, the court finally handed down its verdict in the NEWJEANS versus Adore case. The decision ended up being in favor of Adore, meaning the court confirmed the validity of the members' contracts and ruled that NEWJEANS hadn't provided sufficient grounds to justify their termination. As expected, NEWJEANS and their legal team immediately filed an appeal. Their official statement read, "While we respect the court's decision, our clients remain of the position that it is difficult to return to Adore and resume activities when all trust between the two sides has been effectively shattered. We hope that the appellate court will thoroughly review the evidence and existing laws on exclusive contracts and deliver a wise decision." Now, as always, this video will include some of my own opinions, not to sway your perspective, but to share my personal analysis based on what I've learned. Personally, I think it might not have been the smartest move for NEWJEANS' legal team to include that last line in their statement, specifically the part that says, "We hope that the appellate court will thoroughly review the evidence and existing laws on exclusive contracts and deliver a wise decision." Here's why. Judges, especially those at the appellate level, have worked decades to earn their positions. They've spent years studying, practicing, and moving up the legal hierarchy, often sacrificing a lot of time and energy along the way. Naturally, most of them have a certain professional pride, and rightfully so. They're very protective of their credibility, and typically don't respond well to any statement that could be interpreted as questioning their intelligence or judgment. So, when a lawyer publicly says something like, "We hope the appellate court delivers a wise decision," it can come across, even if unintentionally, as implying that the previous judges weren't wise or that they ignored the evidence and existing laws. It's subtle, but statements like that can rub the judiciary the wrong way. Remember, many lawyers and judges move in the same professional circles. They know one another, they respect one another's work, and they tend to maintain a very tight professional decorum. Now, I'm not saying this will actually harm NEWJEANS' case. It's a minor thing in the bigger picture, but it was something that really stood out to me. It's just a small example of how public wording in legal disputes can sometimes carry unspoken implications that go beyond what's on the surface. Now moving on to the actual appeal process. There are ultimately 3 possible paths that this can take, and I'll go through each of them in detail. The first possible outcome is that the court accepts NEWJEANS' appeal, meaning that a higher court, in this case likely the High Court, will formally take on the case for review. Now, it's important to understand how an appeal actually works in South Korea. An appeal is not a retrial, and it's not an opportunity for NEWJEANS or their legal team to bring in new evidence, witnesses, or arguments that weren't part of the original trial. Instead, the appeal process is about reviewing the legality and fairness of the previous court's verdict. The higher court essentially examines whether the lower court correctly applied the law and followed proper legal procedures. The judges at the appellate level will go through all the court records, the trial transcripts, the legal reasoning, and the written judgment from the lower court. Their focus is on whether the legal principles and precedents were correctly followed, not on re-evaluating facts or hearing emotional testimonies. This is a very technical and procedural step. The appellate court won't summon witnesses, and there won't be dramatic courtroom moments like in a trial. It's largely based on documents, legal briefs, and written opinions. If the higher court finds that the lower court made a legal or procedural mistake, for instance, misinterpreting a statute, violating due process, or failing to consider a key legal precedent, then the appeal can be successful. That would lead to either a reversal of the decision, a modification of the verdict, or in some cases, the case being sent back down for retrial under corrected legal guidance. This could take anywhere from 4 months to 1 year if accepted to conclude. However, if the appellate court concludes that the lower court handled the case correctly and that there were no significant legal errors, then the original ruling will be upheld. So in NEWJEANS' situation, the appeal is essentially a legal audit of the first verdict, a close inspection of the judgment's reasoning, rather than a refight of the case itself. The second possible scenario scenario is that the higher court rejects NewJeans' request for an appeal altogether. What this means is that the appellate court decides there's no valid reason to even review the case. Essentially, the judges are saying, we've looked at the application, and we don't see any major legal errors or procedural problems worth reconsidering. In this situation, the court won't even go through the case files in detail. They'll simply dismiss the request at the preliminary stage because they believe the original verdict was sound and handled correctly. However, that doesn't mean it's completely over at that point. NewJeans would still have one final opportunity to appeal again, this time to the next higher court, sort of like saying, we understand you said no, but please take one last look. This is essentially their final chance to convince the legal system that there might have been an oversight worth examining. If that higher court accepts the second appeal request, then the same process I mentioned earlier will apply, meaning the case will go through a full appellate review, where judges re-examine the legal reasoning behind the original verdict. But if this second request is also denied, then that leads us straight into the third and final scenario. Now, the third scenario is when all appeal attempts are rejected. In that case, the court's original verdict becomes final and binding, with no further room for challenge. This would mean that the outcome in favor of Ador officially stands, and NewJeans must comply with the ruling. That includes returning to Ador under the terms of their existing contracts and covering all litigation-related costs, including court fees and possibly part of Ador's legal expenses. At this point, a lot of fans have been speculating about what NewJeans' future might look like under Ador, especially given everything that's happened. Some believe the group might choose to stop releasing new music and simply wait out their contracts in silence. But honestly, that's very unlikely from both a legal and practical standpoint. Here's why. Their contracts, which the court has now reaffirmed as valid, include clauses that require Ador to actively support and manage the members' careers. That means Ador is legally obligated to provide them with the resources to continue their professional activities. This includes funding for music production, access to producers, directors, stylists, and all the necessary infrastructure that comes with being an active idol group. So, while things may move slowly at first as tensions cool down, it's very possible that we'll see new music from NewJeans sometime around 2026 or 2027. Before the legal dispute, the group had already hinted at plans for a world tour, which Ador themselves confirmed during the court proceedings. The company had been preparing a full album and a global tour, but all of that was put on hold when the lawsuit began and the members effectively cut ties. Now that the verdict has confirmed Ador's authority over their contracts, there's a strong chance that those plans could resume once the dust settles. It might take a few months for things to stabilize, but I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing those shelved projects quietly coming back to life, possibly with a comeback announcement or a new concept rollout as a way to re-establish NewJeans under Ador's management. Some NewJeans fans have also been suggesting that the girls could simply act hostile or uncooperative in their work environment. Things like refusing to record, skipping schedules, or just not participating in Ador's planned activities. The idea behind this theory is that if the members make it difficult enough, Ador would eventually decide to terminate their contracts out of frustration or inconvenience. But here's the thing, that kind of approach would actually backfire completely. If NewJeans were to deliberately refuse to fulfill their contractual duties, it wouldn't count as a loophole or a way out. Instead, it would count as a breach of contract, which legally puts them in the wrong. In that scenario, Ador would not only not terminate their contracts out of pity, they'd actually have the legal right to sue the members for damages. The way South Korean contract law works, and especially within the entertainment industry, is very strict when it comes to performance obligations. The company provides the platform, training, and resources, while the artist is expected to carry out the professional duties agreed upon, like recording music, attending schedules, and promoting as a group. If the artist intentionally fails to uphold those obligations, the agency can claim that the artist caused financial harm to the company, such as lost profits, delayed projects, or reputational damage. In that case, NewJeans would still remain bound by their contracts, but they could also be ordered to pay substantial penalties to Ador. If the artist intentionally fails to uphold those obligations, the agency can claim that the artist caused financial harm to the company, such as lost profits, delayed projects, or reputational damage. In that case, NewJeans would still remain bound by their contracts, but they could also be ordered to pay substantial penalties to Ador. In many cases, companies actually do both. They end the contract and pursue legal damages to recover their costs. So, while fans might think that being uncooperative could force Ador's hand, in reality, it would only strengthen Ador's legal position and make things far more difficult for the members. The courts would likely view that kind of behavior as a deliberate breach, which would erase much of the public sympathy the girls currently have in the legal context. If anything, the smarter move from a legal and strategic standpoint would be for NEWJEANS to continue upholding their professional obligations, even if it's just to maintain good faith and avoid giving Ador any extra ammunition. It would show that they're still honoring their side of the deal, which could help them later if they ever seek to negotiate, settle, or eventually reevaluate their contracts down the line. That's all for today. If you have any more questions, please feel free to ask, and I'll try to explain to the best of my ability. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.